Simeon and Levi replied, "Should our sister be treated like a whore?" Thank God for Simeon and Levi. They had righteous anger for the heinous crime committed against their little sister, Dinah. They served up justice on her behalf. They rescued her from being held hostage. They spoke out on her behalf when no one else would. Without them, Dinah's story may not be told. Dinah is an innocent teenage girl, a virgin, most likely around 15 or 16 years old. Different people have different ideas about how old she was. Possibly she was young as 6 or 8. In that ancient society, as around a 15-year-old, she would be considered a full-grown woman. In ours, she's still legally a child. But in both societies, ancient and modern, still very young. So I'll say it again. She was probably around 15 years old. The only daughter living in a household full of blokes with no female company her age, Dinah decides it'd be really nice to go on a day trip to the shops in town to meet some girls her own age and get to know them. An innocent day filled with expectations of shopping, coffees and catch-ups with the local chicks, a bit of gossip and giggling. Out of nowhere, to shatter her life, entitled princeling, Shechem sees her, rapes her. He has not only hurt her physically and scarred her spiritually and emotionally, he has forever ruined her chances of marriage. In fact, we know from the rest of the Bible story that she never married and never had children. Shechem has stolen Dinah's entire future from her in one cruel and selfish act. But that's not enough for him. Shechem holds her hostage for days in his dad's mansion, as though that's normal. He becomes infatuated with her, and it says in the Bible that he spoke tenderly to her. How freaking creepy would that be for Dinah, on top of all the trauma she has already suffered at his hands? He thinks he's in love. That's a horror movie end to an innocent day out for a sweet young woman, except it's not a movie, it's real life. It's her life. All too often, the life of women and girls today, unfortunately, rape is incredibly hard to get a conviction for in Australia or in most countries, and so it goes quite often underreported. At a conference in Sydney recently, we heard the harrowing testimony of a woman who had been raped repeatedly as a child by a church leader and then held in sex slavery as an adult, till finally escaping to freedom. We heard the harsh facts of life in this internet age from Melinda Tankard-Reist, an anti-pornography campaigner, about how teenage boys in our country are using technology to pressure their female student peers into not only sharing pictures of themselves in states of undress, but into participating into degrading sexual acts and into signing sex slavery agreements. This isn't the stuff of fiction, it's the stuff happening in our schools in this country today, and apparently it's just as prevalent in Christian schools in this country. The largest group of sex offenders in this country are not creepy old men. It's boys aged between 14 and 19 years. Let that sink in. You've got to wonder how many times Shechem raped before this without consequence in a city that celebrated and enabled him. How many young women he has destroyed. In his delusion, he thinks he loves Dinah. And if he can only marry her, Dinah will just love him back and they'll live happily ever after. What a self-absorbed psycho. Without hesitation, Shechem's dad, Hamor, will pay any price to get whatever his most favoured son Shechem wants. He has no pity for Dinah locked in his basement, apparently raping women and holding them hostage in that city as A-OK, a city he presides over and is in charge of. Shechem is the city's most favoured son. He is named after the city, or the city's named after him. We don't know which one's which, but whatever the case, he is its epitome. Looking at him, that's what the city is all about. This is the man they all look up to and admire most, a rapist. It is a society sick to its core. In this whole episode, note that Dinah's voice is not heard, not once. Evil men try to bargain for her life. Her father does not speak when he hears of this outrageous thing done to his only daughter. He does not say one word because he is in fear for his own life when the evil men come out to try and strike a bargain. Utterly useless, Dinah's father Jacob just looks on like a spectator. The only time he speaks, it is in anger at his sons over their actions, potentially painting a target on their backs. And don't forget, he's paid 100 pieces of money for the land he's on. He doesn't want to move. He's set up shop. He's inconvenienced. How dare they? Jacob will bear a grudge against Simeon and Levi until the very end of his life. Over this, on his deathbed, decades later, Jake disinherits Simeon and Levi because they caused him trouble all those years ago with these Hivites. No mention, not once, of their fierce love and concern for Dinah, their sister, his daughter. Clearly, Jacob had none for her, not a skerrick. Jacob had no inkling of what his sons were up to when Shechem and Hamor arrived with proposals of marriage and alliance. From his point of view, dumbly watching on, Jacob thought that with his silence, he was endorsing his son's clever deal to marry off Dinah and to have their family joined to the people of the city so that they could live in the land happily ever after. In doing so, Jacob shows a callous disregard for his only daughter and contempt for the promises of God. God said he would give the land to Jacob and his descendants. It's not for Jacob to cut deals to get the land through into marriage, or to whore out his only daughter, or to cut deals to save his own skin, because God did promise him on multiple occasions that he would be blessed and he would be looked after. The only people that act on Dinah's behalf to speak out for her are her brothers. Simeon and Levi, and then followed by the others, take action to rescue her and to give her justice. Simeon and Levi righteously challenge their dad's callous, uncaring attitude. Is it right for our sister to be treated by a whore, like a whore? By which they mean, is it right for you, Dad, to sell our sister like a whore? Not only did Dinah endure the agony and shame of rape, but while she was held hostage by her rapist and his family, she was used as a bargaining chip, as though she were just a thing. Hamor, Shechem, and all the men of the city see Dinah as an opportunity to get their hands on all of Jacob's wealth. So they all agree to what I think is unthinkable. They agree to cut the foreskin off their own penises. That's how greedy and desperate they are for all that cattle and all that money they see sitting out there outside their city. They think in the big scheme of things, well, a bit of pain today is worth the price of everything we'll get. Every man who circumcised himself that day is just as guilty of Dinah's rape as Shechem himself, as they were willing to use her sorry situation to benefit financially. But just like most people that have ever lived in the Middle East from then until this day, the men of Shechem did not count on the sheer cunning and ferocity of Jewish men who have been wronged. Simeon and Levi rightly made Shechem, Hamor, and the men of that city suffer the excruciating agony that Dinah had felt and made them suffer over those 3 long days of their circumcision. Then at the height of their pain, as weak and defenseless as their sister was, in the moment of her attack, Simeon and Levi then come and make them pay with their lives. Along with Jacob, you might think, oh gosh, that's extreme. But years later, when Moses records God's law in Exodus 22 and in Deuteronomy 22, which you can go and look up for yourself, the penalty for rape, depending on the circumstances, is death by stoning from the entire community. It will not be accepted. Or you'll pay an extremely heavy fine. Or you will take lifelong responsibility for your victim's well-being. Whichever way it falls, the law is designed to deter rape as being utterly repugnant to the people of God. You also might think it's extreme for Simeon and Levi to kill all the men of that city and not just the offender. Jacob will condemn Dinah's brothers, but as you move on from here through the scriptures, God does not. Not one word from him. A society that tacitly endorses and is complicit in rape, that idolises rapists and uses rape opportunistically to get rich, is sick to the core. Is it a bad thing if a society like that is ended? Don't forget, just 2 generations earlier, God wiped out the cities of the plain, the cities surrounding Sodom and Gomorrah. They had become so greedy there that they drove people into poverty and extinguished their lives. They had become so corrupt that the men of Sodom would turn out to the last man to ritually gang rape male visitors to the town. God only saved one family out of that entire region of Sodom and Gomorrah from the coming destruction, and that was at the insistent intercession of Abraham. So it would seem Shechem, the man in the city, had it coming. Centuries later, Jesus would say, this is a truth. You reap what you sow. Sex is given by God as the most beautiful and exciting act of intimacy a husband and wife can enjoy together as they delight in each other and become one. And it is an act that may issue in brand new life. It's creative. Rape is an ugly crime of power and entitlement, an act of greed that is physically, spiritually, and emotionally destructive. Too often, victim survivors are disbelieved by their friends, by their family, by the police, and by the courts, and they are traumatised again and again and again. What has all of this got to do with us here today? If anyone ever trusts in you enough to make a disclosure about something like this to you, close your mouth and listen with everything you've got and believe. Even if in the back of your mind you think, oh, this can't be right, or that person wouldn't do that, or you have all these questions, keep your mouth shut. It is not your job to figure out the facts, because they have been brutally traumatised. Listen, 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 and believe. And if they're open, help them to get some support. What else does this have to do with us here today? You can start by never grizzling to me ever again about when you are asked to do comprehensive checks on your suitability to take on ministry roles in this church on its behalf. Working with children's check, police check, safe ministry training. I don't want to hear you whinging about the time it takes you or the bother it causes you. These are the only instruments available to us at the moment. We should have better instruments, but they're what we've got, and they're part of an overall strategy so that we can stand closely together, close ranks to keep evil from our midst. So these things will take you some time. So they will take you some bother. Get over yourselves. And men, get a hold of your thoughts and your lusts. Exercise some self-control, which is the number one fruit of the Holy Spirit. So often men blame women for rape, the way they dress, the way they act, and all the rest, like Muslim cleric Sheikh Halali did in Sydney a few years ago, likening women dressed in anything less than a hijab or a burqa as like an open tin of cat food ready to be consumed. What a dog. Men often say they couldn't help themselves, or that they were too drunk, or they were too drugged, or they thought they had consent. Too often their inflated egos are telling them what they want to hear, drowning out the cries of their victims. Just like Shechem. Oh, she loves me. Yeah, right. How often is this phrase used, especially at footy clubs, that boys will be boys, to explain away a whole host of sexual impropriety? How about men acting like the only Son of God? That should be our standard. Our civilization finds itself in a lamentable state whereby the leader of the free world, Donald Trump, is pretty near a convicted rapist. And if he really didn't do those things, then the stink of sexual abuse follows him around. By his election, his behaviour is endorsed by a whole nation. God help the USA. God help us all. Good men, it's up to you to fiercely protect all women as your sister, your daughter. No exceptions. To advocate for their safety and well-being, and to see that justice is done on their behalf. It starts with me, the way I talk about women, the way I think about women, what I look at on my phone, what I look at on my TV, what I look at on my computer. The Chief of the Australian Army, Lieutenant General David Morrison, in response to sexual harassment, abuse and rape in the Australian Defence Forces, said this as his bottom line a few years ago: the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. This makes me think of a story I heard of a man who over 20 years ago, a young Queensland tradie, a Christian man, on holidays in an Asian country, a popular holiday destination, was having breakfast at a cafe one morning when he overheard a Western man asking a local shopkeeper nearby for directions to get sex. The nearby shopkeeper gave him those directions, but when the man clarified that he was looking for children to have sex with, the shopkeeper said, "Oh, no, don't go down that street. You'll find them down this street." That young tradie, horrified and without a clue as to what he was doing, followed. He knew he had to act to save the children. And so his life's work began in what has become the world-leading ministry known as Destiny Rescue. I've put the information about them, the link, in our newsletter, and it's been on our wall there for ages. The standard you walk past is the standard you accept. I sat on those steps of our church after one Sunday morning service with a woman who had been in a lot of trouble with the police. I suspect she had done a lot of bad things because a lot of bad things had been done to her. I sat with her where, in tears, she told me that she had just been raped in her camp behind Mooroopna railway station by the man that she thought would offer her just a bit more safety. This is a terrible truth. Often homeless women will give sex to a bloke and pair up with them in order to have just a little bit more of a sense of safety. They pick the best of a bad bunch and stick with them. I listened. I believed. I told her I would support her to make a report to the police, to get her to hospital, to do anything she would like me to do for her. But she declined because she said, they will not care because of who I am and what I've done. I tried to reassure her that she, despite anything she's ever done, is still a worthwhile and worthy woman, and certainly not deserving of being raped, ever. As we talked, her rapist casually strolled by whistling. He was having a great day, making disparaging remarks to her as he passed by. And so she rightly arced up in anger. Not wanting her to get hurt, I shirt-fronted him and we wound up punching on in the car park, and I put him face down in the dirt out there on the footpath. A place where a dog like that belongs. The police came and moved him on, but there was no justice for that woman. No healing, no peace. And in the end, she went to prison. And he's still roaming around out there. We must have a righteous anger for the heinous crimes committed against our sisters, our daughters. We must fiercely pursue justice on their behalf. We must support the rescue of the women being held hostage. We must speak out on their behalf when no one else will. As God's people, we must demand a higher standard from the boys and the men amongst us and those in our society. I honestly don't know how to conclude a sermon on such a horrific subject as rape, except to ask the same question that Simeon and Levi did of their useless father. Should our sisters, our daughters, be treated like whores? Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Let us pray.